I'd like to introduce Raymond Friel, who is the CEO of Caritas Social Action. He has previously worked as an English teacher, but we won't hold that against him, a head teacher and a CEO of 2 multi-academy trusts. And he's going to be talking to us today about the mission of the church, reimagined in a post-COVID society. So I'll hand you over to Raymond now.
Well, good morning, everyone.
Morning.
Morning, Raymond.
It's lovely to be with you. So, 30 years in Catholic education and now with Caritas, and I'm learning lots of new things, which is really exciting. I just realised I haven't taught a 45-minute lesson for a long time, so this is going to be a bit rubbish, and I hope no one's at the back kind of grading this, so bear with me. I do want to build in some discussion points, because I think that's really important. I think we have a lot of discussion. Is that okay? And I think Jennifer's right. I put post-COVID, and that's not right. I think it should be COVID society for the next probably decade, you know?
Yeah.
So let's work on that assumption. We're in a COVID society. And what is the mission of the church in this society? I think we should be and encourage everyone to have that discussion about the mission of the church. Is it the same as it was? Does it need to be refreshed, reinvigorated, reimagined? And I think it does. And I'd love to hear more people, especially more senior people, I don't mean people in this room, animating and inviting us to talk about the mission of the church. So we can do our bit, we can do our bit to animate that discussion. So I want to start and pick up, and thank you, Philip. That was a great start to the day, and Philip's talk and David's prayers, what a wonderful start. And actually, something Philip said, many things that Philip said resonated, but I want to pick up the bit about the maps of human experience, that wonderful phrase from Newman. And I want to start by talking about not being divine, not the transcendent, but the human. And I think that's really important for us. And go back to that wonderful fanfare at the start of Gaudium et Spes, the Second Vatican Council, the joys and hopes, the sorrows and anxieties of people today, and this speaks so powerfully now, as much as it did in 1965 or whenever, especially of those who are poor and afflicted. Always that especially of those who are poor and afflicted, are the joys and hopes, the sorrows and anxieties of the disciples of Christ. There's nothing truly human which does not also affect them. It's the church's interest in being human. The church is an expert in humanity. And actually, the gospel and the life of Jesus is showing us how to be human. It's the mission of Jesus is showing us how to be a fully human being. Herbert McCabe said that Jesus was the first fully human being because he lived wholly according to love, which I think is a great definition of the human vocation, being human. Living wholly according to love. So I want to start with that theme in mind about being truly human. And I want to just take us back as we think about this context we're in and these extraordinary 18 months. And in schools, you've been on the front line. When this started, I was still in education. So I know what schools have been through, I know what teachers and their leaders have been through, I know the extraordinarily difficult and intense period it's been and how remarkably well schools have done throughout this period. And what we've learned about being human. This is the first question I want to ask you. Think back to March 2020. It's one of those moments. Growing up, I remember my parents always used to talk about where they were when they heard that JFK had been assassinated. And we think 20 years ago, we all know where we were when the Twin Towers attack happened. Those epoch-defining moments in our lives, I remember it vividly. And I think we remember the same, March the 21st, when we woke up and we walked around the streets of our towns and cities, and there was nothing happening. And the skies were quiet, and there was no traffic, and it was like, this is extraordinary. What's going on here? And over the next few weeks, we were on a journey. And I think what was remarkable in that journey was our exploration of what being human meant. So the first question, I'm going to be really strict with time here because I want to finish on time. I'm going to ask you to consider, what did we remember about being truly human in lockdown? What did we remember about being truly human? The assumption is that we forgot a lot about it, because the narrative is, which is becoming clearer and clearer to many people. You know, since the early 80s, we're on that kind of neoliberal economic model, which was killing people, which was destroying communities, which was operating by contract, not by covenant, which was atomizing individuals, which was reducing people to functions of companies and the economy. That's the journey we're on, this inexorable dash towards so-called prosperity, endless GDP growth, destroying the planet in the process, and communities, and arguably our spiritual centres. And that stopped abruptly, and we started to think slightly differently. So what did we remember about being truly human in lockdown? Now, it's a big question for 2 minutes. Do you want to have a go? 2 minutes with your neighbour. One or two things. What did we remember about being human in lockdown? Chat to your neighbours and we'll get a little bit of feedback. This is my start activity. How am I doing?
Doing well.
Okay, let's go.
Last 3 weeks in our red school, well, it's a bit season holidays, so last 3 weeks now is
One minute. Great. I'm not used to classes like this that are so well behaved. So this is great. So does anyone want to share anything? What did we remember about being truly human? Any quick insights or comments?
Got to know the neighbours.
Got to the neighbours.
Because we were moving house, and the removal, we were actually moving house the day after Boris had made the announcement. And we were fortunately only moving round the corner to another house. And all our neighbours just dropped everything and just moved us. And now we've got a social group where we walk, we talk, we go out for meals.
Brilliant. Neighbours.
Neighbours, which you forget about.
Yeah.
And they were truly human. They were truly
yeah.
human.
And that's neighbours as in the people that beside you.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, brilliant, thank you. Yeah, please.
Relationships, we downsized. The children didn't look like they were ever coming back from university. The projection wasn't to stay where they were. And they all came back. We were all there, but it was the most valuable time, because I don't think they ever would have come back. So I had 2 years that I would never have had.
Yeah, really? Yeah. We ended up with 2 out of our 3, but yeah. But yeah, we talked. Now, I mean, there's a flip side to that. In some relationships it would be difficult, and at the other extreme it was tough and abusive. But for some it was a refreshment, wasn't it? Great, thank you. Please.
I said having time to like nurture yourself. You know, you normally put yourself last, but having like a little bit more time where you could sit and think or pray or read or reflect. Normally the things you go, I haven't got time, I've got to go and do this.
Yeah.
And as you just put yourself forward a little bit more.
There's a lovely phrase, I heard it somewhere, one of these stories, but the punchline is, we're letting our souls catch up with us. Which it felt like that, didn't it? It's like just a little bit of reflection time, and found myself outside looking at dragonflies and photographing flowers and things, you know, noticing things. Please?
I think it put quite a few things in perspective. You know, as a lot of other couples did. My brother was due to get married 5 days after the lockdown was announced, and it put that into perspective. It wasn't just there for a party. It was actually it was the meanings, and it put a lot of things into perspective.
Yeah. And seeing the deeper reality of
absolutely.
I think as well, it wasn't just about me, but it was about the community. So it was about when I go shopping and I wear a mask, is that we're all in it together, and it was that global community. What I do matters to everybody else. That I'm young, but by wearing a mask, I'm protecting the vulnerable and the elderly.
Community. Okay, the word community suddenly was on our lips. Absolutely. So if we just to the back, we'll come back to it.
From another perspective, I was scared. There was a lot of positives that we took because of the time we had at home. But I was scared for myself and my family and my friends that we were all very vulnerable to something that could kill us. And that changed everything. You know, when you're inside with your family, you're actually contained, but you had to still get out a little bit, and every time you did, that could have been it.
Absolutely. We were frightened. We were frightened. Absolutely. And it was that kind of not just but we were frightened.
Everyone you knew.
Yeah. And in our lifetimes, that we've got to think back to our parents and grandparents maybe in the war before you that sense of collective fear. Absolutely. Yes, please, then we'll come to the back.
I was just going to say, it was the absence of community. You know, if you're on your own, I never want to go there again. You know, it was simple things like a cup of tea with somebody. Couldn't have, and really craving that companionship.
Presence. Yeah, absolutely. Because some people were on their own for a long time, which is really tough. Yeah, please.
How fragile we are as human beings. And go back to being scared as well. How quickly we can go from being healthy to intensive care. I ended up in intensive care. Within 2 days of being told I got COVID, I was in intensive care. It's how fragile and how scary it can be. But at the same time, it made you closer to God, because I've never prayed so much. You know, I buried my sister 6 months before, and I love her, but I don't want to go and see her yet. But it made you a lot closer to God, I felt, as well.
Well, thank God you're here. Good to see you.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Our fragility. Yeah, absolutely. Is that okay? Yeah?
There was a re-evaluation of priorities. It wasn't the traditionally high-paid jobs that were the priority at that point.
Yeah. Who's important in this world of ours? Yeah, absolutely. Is that okay? Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I mean, it's powerful, isn't it? And I think the church, real church, I think the church should find more opportunities to allow people to speak and to lament and to share their, just as we've seen a snippet here of what we've been through. I think that's helpful. I hope the Synod opens up some of that. Anyway, That's another story. That's not what I'm talking about. So yeah, I mean, all these things. I think we remembered gratitude and those social liturgies. On Thursday evening outside with the saucepans, yeah, the antiphons of thanks. Social liturgy, you know, taking the knee, banging the saucepans. Something in us, isn't there, that gravitates to that quite naturally. Sacrifice. You know, we're talking about sacrifice. We heard of people sacrificing themselves for others. Whether it was just going to work or not living at home because they didn't want to infect the people they work with in a care home, or people giving their respirators to others. I mean, sacrifice. We suddenly, you know, we think, you know, the language we talk, I don't know if you think this, but the language we talk seems a bit removed from people, the language of atonement and sacrifice, and God and theology and RE. We were talking about sacrifice. The workers, you know, Joseph is one of our themes threading through the day, the visibility of workers. Suddenly it's the people that collected the rubbish and drove the vans and kept working in the shops and ran the schools and ran the IC units. It's like, oh, thank God for them. They became visible. Courtesy. Did your emails change at all? Did the tone of them change?
I hope you're well. Yes.
Are we still doing that? Have we gotten that already?
Yeah, no, I didn't.
Yeah? Hopefully some of these things hang on. January 2020. Raymond, can I have that report by Monday regards Andy? And that's almost an accurate email. April 2020. Dear Raymond, I hope this finds you well. How's that report going? And do you need some help with it? Best wishes, Andy. I mean, it was quite, wasn't it? I mean, it did change. Priorities. Community, as you mentioned, the common good. Charity, giving, volunteering, hundreds of thousands of people signing up to help. We met the vulnerability, shielding, people are on their own. We paid attention to the vulnerable. And that's not a given, is it? We paid attention to the vulnerable. Mortality, our fragility. I thought, God, this is where, you know, we could not last the week here, you know. Simplicity, do with less. I'm not going to have my holiday. I'm not going to get to the restaurant. I'm just going to have to do something more simple. And you know what? That's good as well. And prayer. You know, that prayer petition, the Gospels, you know, the Canaanite woman, I love that one. It's that raw prayer of petition that just help me, Lord. You just help me through that prayer of petition that runs through the human condition from start to finish. And presence. Is this ringing any bells here? Presence, real presence. You know, people we missed, sitting in front of a screen watching Mass, watching consecration, listening to the prayer of spiritual communion and thinking, this isn't it. This isn't real. It's watching something take place somewhere and then go back into church and thinking, my God, this is it. Communion, real presence. I get it. The kiss of God. Real presence. I'm getting this now. Creation. You know, the rivers healing quickly, the skies empty and breathing, the canals of Venice, you can see the fish in them, you know? What Pope Francis calls an eruption of fraternity. This is our stuff. This is our language. And it's not language which is alien to people. It strikes me really strongly. Someone once said, the church provides compelling answers to questions that nobody asks. That ring a bell? I think that's changed. I think the church and people's concerns, as Vatican II articulated, are closer again, being human. So where was the church in all this? Did the church speak into this? Well, we've got a wisdom And we've got a tradition about human fullness and being human, which is multi-dimensional. And Pope Francis speaks really strongly to this. To be a human being is not just about my relationship with God. Yeah? And sometimes Catholicism is a little bit guilty of that. A privatized religion, me and God and my soul and getting to heaven. That's a caricature, but I think there's maybe something in it. The climate movement is sometimes a little bit guilty of, well, it's me in creation. I'm just going to look after nature. With COP26 coming up, you can see strains of that. If it's just between us and our neighbours, well that's fine, but that's horizontal, and then you end up with kind of dimensions missing. So the tradition, this goes right back into our biblical tradition, right back into the Old Testament, that human fullness is in being in right relations with God, with ourselves, as in knowing who we are and our vocation as human beings, to be images of God and to be loving people. And right relations with our neighbour, because in our neighbour we meet God, and right relations with creation, which is the abundant gift of God. And if any one of those relations are out of sync, then we do not have human. Does that make sense? We do not have human wholeness. So the church, I think, did speak into this situation really powerfully, and there was that marvellous moment, because the church does symbolism really well, doesn't it? The church does liturgy really quite well, because we've had a lot of practice. And that moment in March 2020, when this old man in a white cassock, on his own, walked through St. Peter's Square and talked to the world and put into words, the feelings of this frightened humanity. We were caught off guard by an unexpected turbulent storm. We have realised that we're on the same boat, all of us fragile, disoriented, but at the same time important and needed, all of us called to row together, each of us in need of comforting the other. Now, some people challenge the image, say, well, hang on, that's not quite right. Some people say, same storm, different boats. And I get that too, because the pandemic exposed inequality dramatically. But I think the Pope's message is nevertheless valid. He's talking about the way he does so skillfully. In that one paragraph is about half of Catholic social teaching. Yeah? We're important and needed. The dignity of human beings, the core of Catholic social teaching. We're important and needed. All of us called to row together the common good. The same boat, in other words, we inhabit the same space, the same planet. In need of comforting the other, solidarity. He's naming human need. He's not using theological language, but it's there, and he's naming it really powerfully. He loves images, and he uses them well. Now, Vatican II brought us back to images, didn't it? Remember Lumen Gentium, talking about the church, again biblically, using images, not concepts of the perfect society or theological definitions, but the church as a mother, the church as an estate, the church as a building, the church as a sheepfold. And Pope Francis, in that tradition, and this is before the pandemic, he talked about the church as a field hospital, which again was very powerful and impressive, actually. I love the way this is an early interview in his papacy. He talks about what we need today, and these words resonate more powerfully now, after the pandemic or during the pandemic. The ability to heal wounds and to warm the hearts of the faithful. It needs nearness, proximity, a proximate church. A proximate church. I see the church as a field hospital after battle. There's there's slides kind of further on which you'll get. There's a link to an article which I'd urge you to read if you haven't read it, by Thomas Halleck, who's a Czech priest and theologian. He's writing in the tablet that you've got in your bags, actually, a scorching article about the church. He wrote an article last year expanding the image of the field hospital that Francis uses. And he says, okay, this is a great image. I'm suggesting 3 further dimensions of the field hospital. A field hospital is one that offers diagnosis. A field hospital is one that gives you preventive medicine and treatment. And a field hospital is one which is convalescent. And in the article, he expands each of those 3: the diagnosis, the preventive, and the convalescent. I just want to look at the diagnosis just briefly. I'm going to talk about sin. Is that okay? Can we still talk about sin? Some theologians don't like talking about sin and say it's too negative. But I think, well, we should. I think we should. I think we've got a tradition that actually helps to explain the human condition, which is really realistic. You know, Christian realism is a gift to our young people, isn't it? You know, we are not enthralled to utopia, everything's going to be perfect, but we are not enthralled to despair either. You know, we call it original sin, and we say human beings are good. Remember Genesis? You're good, but flawed. You're good, but you screw up. Okay? You're good, but you just keep making mistakes. It's always that mixed blessing, isn't it? So this is one of the best definitions of sin I've ever heard, and it's from the wonderful Pope Francis. And why do I feel like defending the Pope? I don't know, because some people are giving him a hard time, which I think is a disgrace. So let's up it for Pope Francis. And this, I think, is one of the best diagnoses of sin there is. Our sin, and forgive me for reading it, I know it's not very good pedagogy, but just in case you can't see very well. Our sin lies in failing to recognise value, in waiting to possess and exploit that which we do not value as gifts. So look at the language. Possess and exploit. And we're into the language of relationships here. We're building up to a kind of theme. Exploiting is disordered relationships. Okay, relationships of power and domination. Sin always has this same root of possessiveness, of enrichment at the expense of others and creation itself. The sin is exploiting that which must not be exploited, whether it's creation or people, in extracting wealth from where it should not be taken. Sin is a rejection of the limits that love requires. In the garden, the vision of humanity involved, this is flourishing, which means don't do this, don't go there, and don't do that. And what did we do? We went there, we did that. You know, because we do, because we get it wrong. Does that make sense? Yeah, I do love that. And you'll have these slides, by the way, just to reflect on further later. So, this is a bit of theology which makes me really nervous in this company, because as Jennifer reminded me, I'm an English teacher, and you're theologians. And here's me talking about theology in front of you guys. But I'll stick to the compendium, and I think I'm on safe ground. Now, the compendium of the social doctrine of the church, my new mission in life is to make sure that everybody reads this and knows about it. I'm not going to ask you if you know about it. In fact, I will. Do you know about this? Okay, that's fine. That's okay. I was talking to a bunch of deacons in a diocese that remained endless. I said, I assume in your 4 years of formation, the compendium of the social doctrine of the church was at the heart of your formation, wasn't it? I mean, it was just like, what language is this guy talking? Which I find a little bit disturbing. So can you please do me a favour? The first 100, it's a bit of a doorstopper. It's not a short text, but the first 100 pages of this are just brilliant. So if you're looking for a bit of CPD, enrichment, reflection, go back to the first 100 pages of the compendium. It is brilliant. It is fantastic. So here's how it defines redemption. God in Christ redeems just me? No. God in Christ redeems not only the individual, and Francis quotes this, by the way, in Fratelli Tutti, but also the social relations existing between men and women. It's human condition and its flawed and broken relationships that are redeemed, that are forgiven. in the crucifixion. Again, Herbert Mackay, the wonderful Dominican, said that at the crucifixion, original sin is simultaneously revealed and forgiven. Does that make sense? The Christian revelation of original sin is not Genesis, but the crucifixion. That's when we rejected love. At the crucifixion. That's when we destroyed love, rejected love. When love absorbed the human condition and forgave it. Does that make any sense? Theologians, am I doing okay? Yeah, okay, good. I'll take that. Nothing's been thrown at me. No tennis ball's been thrown at me, so that's okay. So this is important. And at this point, I just don't think this is mainstream enough in the church about social justice at the heart of redemption. Forget this bit, then things start to flow from it. So let me put it this way. Still in the compendium, and this is Paul VI. This is Vatican II. This is John Paul II. This is not some radical stuff from South America. You know, well, thank God for South America. This is mainstream. Okay, but listen to some people in the church, you wouldn't think it. The church aims at a complete form of humanism. It's not a bad word. Christian humanism is mainstream. That is to say, the liberation from everything that oppresses man and woman. We're still in that sort of non-inclusive language, I'm afraid. And the development of the whole man and woman, and of all men and women. The church's social doctrine indicates the path to follow for a society reconciled and in harmony through justice and love. This is Paul VI. This is Popular and Progressive. Okay, liberation from everything. So yes, it's liberation from sin. It's liberation from oppressive social circumstances as well. Okay. Now we can see this in Scripture. Okay. And this has become more and more important to me. Luke 4, 18 to 19, the Nazareth Manifesto. So bear with me for a few minutes on this. If you want to look into this in a little bit of depth, I would recommend a book by Kenneth E. Bailey called Jesus Through Middle Eastern Eyes. Did anyone come across Kenneth E. Bailey? He's a wonderful scholar, and he takes these passages and he just sits with it for page after page after page. It's compelling and brilliant, deep analysis and close reading of the text. So, remember the story? Jesus early on in the ministry. This is the longest treatment of the inauguration of Jesus' ministry. So this is important stuff. This is not just repent and follow me. This is an extended look at the beginning of the ministry. So Jesus goes back to his hometown, stands up in the synagogue, is handed the scroll from the prophet Isaiah, and finds the place where it is written. So there's a deliberation here. He finds the place where it's written. The Spirit of the Lord is upon me because he has anointed me. He's just been baptized. He's a prophet. He's anointed me to do 5 things. Notice the pattern of 5. 5 things. To bring good news to the poor, to proclaim release to the captives, recovery of sight to the blind, number 3, 4, to let the oppressed go free, and 5, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favour. Now, Bailey sees in here a pattern of what he calls inverted parallelism. This is the English teacher in me getting excited again. Inverted parallelism, okay? In other words, if you've got 5 there, 1 matches 5, 2 matches 4, and you get a middle one. That makes sense? So 1 and 5 is proclamation. Good news to the poor, proclaim the year of the Lord's favour. 2 and 4, he calls justice advocacy. Release to the captives, let the oppressed go free. Justice advocacy. And at the heart of this, what he calls the rhetorical climax, the heart, in other words, of the good news, is what? Compassion. Compassion, recovery of sight to the blind. He calls compassion. So he says the good news, as far as he's concerned, the heart of the good news is proclamation justice advocacy, and compassion. And I mean, we could spend the rest of the day on this, but that to let the oppressed go free is not from Isaiah 61. Jesus, or Luke, brings this in from Isaiah 58, verse 6. He's editing the text. This is the hermeneutics of Jesus in action. He brings in Isaiah 58, 6, which is the whole bit about, this is the fast I want, undo the yoke, let the oppressed go free, feed the hungry, to reinforce the point about justice advocacy. Does that make sense? And the problem, you know all about the poor, don't you? And his reading of the poor is, in Isaiah, it's mostly Anavim, it's mostly the poor in spirit, as far as Bailey's concerned. I mean, you may have other ideas, but I trust him, he's a scholar. And that makes sense to me as well. So it's good news to the poor, that's liberation from sin, for those who are poor in spirit and open in faith to the good news and to grace, as we would say in the Catholic tradition. But it's also liberation from oppressive circumstances, because release of the captives is release of the people who are captive in Babylon. It's let the oppressed go free. It's the year of Lord's favour, the Jubilee. So it's that combination of liberation from sin and liberation from oppressive circumstances. Okay? Now, I think I've seen that same passage in the Catechism. And can I just, full disclosure here, I now quite like the Catechism. Having been brought up as a cradle Catholic and associating catechism as something dull and dry, it was all about what not to do, I've come back to it in recent years and seen a treasure there, actually. A treasure house of really interesting stuff. And it talks here in the Catechism about the poor and the preferential option for the poor. And it says, this is 2448, those who are oppressed by poverty are the object of a preferential love on the part of the Church, the preferential option for the poor. I mean, we're familiar with that phrase, okay? Which, since her origin and surprising humility here, in spite of the failings of many of her members, and we know about that, don't we? The failings of many of her members, has not ceased to work for their relief, defence, and liberation. Relief, defence, and liberation. Is that compassion, justice advocacy, and proclamation? Am I seeing too much into that? I mean, you need to take this away and have a look at it. I think I'm seeing the same pattern there. Compassion, justice advocacy, and proclamation. This picture, by the way, the fantastic website called Unequal Scenes. Do you want to go onto that when you get a chance? It's this guy who takes pictures from a drone of the developing worlds, particularly the mega cities where the contrast between rich and poor is dramatic. And it's a great teaching resource. This is Santa Fe in New Mexico. This is Mumbai. You've seen that before. And he allowed me to use this for $25, by the way, so it's quite reasonable. Well, if you use my slides, I guess that counts. Okay? Piggyback in the back of mine. So you go to the margins is the message from Pope Francis. Well, half of the people in Mumbai live in the slums. And it's like, my God, look, the business district and the slums. We've got poverty in this country, we know that. But to see it so vividly is a different matter, isn't it? A completely different matter. So, let the oppressed go. Well, I don't have time to tell you about this, but just briefly, this is when I was in Manila with a bunch of head teachers, and we ended up in a cemetery where the poor lived. I mean, the poorest of the poor lived in a cemetery. And I was asking myself as often, where's the church? Where's the church? And the church, there's the church, those women are the church. And those women were teaching those street children, giving them an education in song and in story about how to be healthy, how to avoid exploitation, how to try and start a little business to get out of this. There was the church working, teaching them prayers. Well, I'm sure there was prayers there as well, but trying to free them from oppressive circumstances. and build better relations. So that's the role of. I'm going to get marked down for this because I'm not going to get to my plenary. And when I was a head teacher with all the wrong ideas about teaching, I remember saying, "But you didn't get your plenary, did you?" No, you didn't. So I'm not doing very well here. But the point I was getting to, and you can take away and think about, is this bit about, the mission of the church is the transformation of social relationships. And obviously that's in school, it's in parishes, but can I suggest that it's the school at the heart of community? And I know that if Andy Lewis was here, he'd be talking about community organising. And I think actually he's onto something. Because the school as the hub and heart of community, helping to transform that community, I think is key. And helping to develop our young people as agents of change, who are smart. Yes, they know their maths. Yes, they know their English. Yes, they know how to argue, because we want them to be agents of change, as Philip said, to be sent out and work for the reign of God, which is improving and developing those social relationships. Okay? So, that's the discussion point that we're going to have in our plenary. But I'm out of time. So that's probably, what, 3 RI probably? For, not that you grade lessons anymore, I know that, but probably an RI. Anyway, shall I stop there, Jennifer?
Yeah.
Well, okay, we've got a minute. Do you want to?
We've got a couple more minutes.
There's not much time, but what we could do is just get some quick comments about how that sits with you, and does it make any sense for a Catholic school, and how might it inform or invigorate the mission of the Catholic school. So rather than ask you to discuss then feedback, what we'll do is just jump into any quick comments or questions for 2 minutes. Is that testing your patience?
No, 2 minutes is perfect.
2 minutes, okay, please.
I had an idea just then, is that during the pandemic, the school was organising food parcels for our families, the preschool meals for children, and is that something we could, maybe not food parcels, but is that a movement we can continue in our schools, making sure our families have got enough, and getting out in the community? We were delivering work packs for our children, Wi-Fi or laptops, so that we had to have paper resources for them. And we were going to their houses, knocking on their front doors, talking to them, and it was a very different sense of community, and I think we should keep that going in some new way.
I was working in Plymouth at the time, and the head teachers were telling me, we're taking food to their doorsteps, and taking food up to the 10th floor to deliver it to the doorstep. They got to know even where these kids lived. It was like, oh, okay, I get it. I really do get it. Please.
With the difficulties the church are going to face in the future anyway, with the shortage of priests, is the school not going to sort of replace the role of the actual physical church in some parishes anyway?
I think you're right. And one of my concerns is that a lot of parishes, are dormant still. They haven't recovered from lockdown. People might go in my little church, about 25% of what it used to be in terms of attendance. Nothing else is happening. Nothing. Now, I know some other parishes are buzzing and flying, but there's just too much dormant. And that worries me. And I think you're right. The schools are not dormant. You can't afford to.
Yeah, like I just know from central Manchester, there's a dormant parish there, St Augustine's, and the only piece of Catholic activity in it is the primary school.
And how vibrant it is, and on a Monday morning, what's the first thing you do? You pray. You pray, you have the gospel, you pray, and then you have your RE, and then you have your, that embodied mission you're talking about. I think you're spot on.
I think something that we're trying to get across to our students at the moment is they are actually the face of the Catholic Church today, not Catholic Church tomorrow, and that's something we're trying to instill in our students, that they are the Catholic Church today, not 10 years down the line. And it's about instilling that in them and getting them to be part of that and recognise that they are the church today.
Today. It's always today, isn't it, in the church? It's today. It's very biblical, today. You're right. And it's agents of change, but advocates of social justice. That's mainstream. That's what I'm trying to say. Mainstream Catholic teaching. Please.
And I think just from what the colleagues said back there about food banks and things, but actually it's giving our young people the skills to actually go out and change the world. You know, politically, they've got to be activists in that way. Otherwise, we're just putting the plaster over things.
It's the skills, you're absolutely right. So when I'm labouring through a comprehension text 20 years ago as an English teacher, now I get the point of it. Now I get the point. Pope Francis calls it unmasking reality. It's being able to see through the lies and deceptions and tricks of political rhetoric and take the mask off and think, actually that's the reality in it, and it's corrupt in some cases. And let me show you what corruption looks like. And let me show you what fairness might look like. It's skills to unmask that, absolutely right. Not everyone's going to be, there's different gifts for different roles, obviously. Please.
I think we've got a role to play in ministry as well, because there's a lot of students who are broken, there's a lot of staff who are broken, tired as well. So in terms of the church isn't or hasn't had the ability to be there, whereas I think schools have, although we were locked down, we were still constant in their lives. So I think it's that idea. I think my role now in school is that ensuring that the academic isn't just the full focus of this year. There's a lot more to do than just the tests at the end.
It's those transforming relationships with yourself. As you say, I detect there's a lot of tiredness, and we're talking a lot about mental health, aren't we? Because a lot of people are fragile. We heard the word fragile, and there's a lot of hidden concern. I think you're absolutely right. And it's like talking to each other, making time for each other, having a conversation, which in school can be difficult, but I think we need to just bend the culture a little bit and say, we're going to have this conversation. And that's okay.